The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the
What does it really take to stop a war that has dragged on for nearly 4 years, displaced millions, and shaken the stability of Europe? For Donald Trump, 2 high-profile summits in just a matter of days have put him center stage in the search for peace in Ukraine. Yet, despite all the pageantry, handshakes, and hopeful words, the obstacles ahead remain daunting. Can Trump actually deliver the breakthrough he craves, or will the promise of peace remain just out of reach? Let's dive deep into this unfolding story. The Alaska Summit. Pomp without breakthroughs. Last Friday, the world watched as Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Alaska. It was a summit rich with symbolism. Cameras captured firm handshakes, warm smiles, and carefully chosen backdrops meant to signal cooperation between the United States and Russia. But beneath the glittering surface, the meeting produced little of substance. Analysts quickly noted that there were no concrete agreements, no ceasefire, and no roadmap toward peace. It was a gathering where style dominated over substance, and while Trump relished the role of statesman, the tangible results were almost non-existent. The symbolism, however, should not be dismissed entirely. For the first time in months, Moscow and Washington were speaking directly at the highest level about the Ukraine war. This alone sent a message. That dialogue, even without immediate breakthroughs, remains possible. The Alaska summit may be remembered less for its outcomes and more for opening a door that had long been closed. For Trump, it was an opportunity to showcase his brand of personal diplomacy and to signal to his supporters at home that he is serious about fulfilling his promise to end forever wars. Washington's historic gathering. Just days later, Washington, D.C. became the center of attention once more. On Monday, 6 European leaders rushed to the White House, eager to assess what had been discussed in Alaska. It was a hastily arranged but highly symbolic gathering. Inside the Oval Office, Trump welcomed his guests with open arms. The tone was cooperative and unusually cordial. Unlike Zelensky's acrimonious February visit, this time the conversations were described as productive and friendly. Leaders spoke in hopeful terms, but the details were thin. The summit carried weight because of who was in the room, not because of what was agreed. And still, there were 2 developments worth noting. First, Trump expressed openness to offering U.S. security guarantees to Ukraine, a key demand of Kyiv and its European allies. Second, he floated the idea of arranging a bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky, followed by a 3-way summit involving himself. The White House meeting also revealed how much European capitals now view Washington as the ultimate broker in this war. While Europe bears the brunt of the conflict's consequences, refugee crises, economic shocks, and security threats, its leaders know that without American backing, no durable agreement can hold. Their rush to Washington was not just about listening to Trump, but also about ensuring they had influence over his next moves. Trump's conditional security guarantees. Security guarantees for Ukraine could be game-changing. For Kyiv, they represent the difference between fragile truce and lasting peace. But Trump's offer came with caveats. The American president suggested that any U.S. commitment might not involve troops on the ground. Instead, he spoke about providing air support while leaving Europe to shoulder most of the burden. This balancing act reflects Trump's broader worldview, an America First approach, where Washington plays a leading but limited role. For Ukraine, the nuance matters. Security guarantees without boots on the ground raise doubts about how credible and enforceable such commitments would be. European leaders, while encouraged by Trump's willingness to consider the idea, also recognize the limitations. Without a clear framework, Ukraine's security could remain precarious. This issue is not only about military logistics, it's also about trust. Ukrainians have long sought concrete assurances from the West after previous promises, such as those made in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, proved insufficient to deter aggression. The fear is that conditional guarantees could leave Ukraine exposed if circumstances shift, or if American political winds change. Trump must therefore strike a delicate balance, offering enough to satisfy Ukraine and Europe, while not overcommitting in a way that might trigger domestic political backlash. The prospect of a Putin-Zelensky summit. Perhaps the most tantalizing prospect to emerge from these meetings was Trump's announcement that arrangements were underway for a direct Putin-Zelensky summit. The details, location, timing, and agenda remain uncertain, but even the idea carries weight. For nearly 4 years, direct talks between the Russian and Ukrainian leaders have seemed out of reach. Bringing them together at one table could represent a dramatic shift. Trump envisions himself as the mediator who could bridge the divide, first by enabling bilateral talks, and then by hosting a three-way summit to finalize an agreement. Yet, this possibility raises important questions. European leaders insist that a ceasefire must be in place before any such meeting. Trump, however, has signaled skepticism, arguing that negotiations cannot wait. This divergence highlights the delicate balance between urgency and caution that defines the peace process. Diplomatic historians note that summits of this kind are often as much about optics as outcomes. Just having Putin and Zelensky in the same room would be framed as progress. But without substantive groundwork, the risk is that the meeting could end in stalemate, or worse, deepen mistrust. For Trump, however, the symbolism of orchestrating such a summit could already serve his narrative as a global dealmaker. The role of personalities and perceptions. Diplomacy often hinges not only on policies but also on personalities. In this case, the personal dynamics between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky loom large. Trump has shown a willingness to trust Putin's intentions, even privately telling French President Emmanuel Macron, unaware of a live microphone, that he believes Putin wants to make a deal for me. Critics view such confidence as risky, given Russia's ongoing battlefield advances. Yet Trump's faith reflects his instinctive belief in personal rapport and deal-making as tools of diplomacy. At the same time, Trump's own temperament introduces unpredictability. Over the past year, his stance towards Zelensky has shifted sharply, at times critical and at times supportive. Allies worry that his positions could turn on a dime, complicating the fragile trust required for long-term agreements. European leaders, aware of this volatility, have adopted a strategy of flattery, praising Trump publicly, hoping to keep him engaged. As Finland's President Alexander Stubb put it, "In the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress than in the past 3.5 years." That optimism may be overstated, but it underscores how much Europe now relies on Trump's personal investment in the process. If his attention drifts, the momentum could vanish overnight. Putin's calculated patience. On the other side of the equation is Vladimir Putin. For all the talk of deals, it is far from certain that the Russian leader actually wants the war to end right now. His forces continue to make incremental progress on the battlefield. From his perspective, time may be an asset rather than a liability. By prolonging negotiations, Putin can strengthen his hand while avoiding new sanctions. Trump's decision to put fresh sanctions on indefinite hold plays directly into this strategy. As long as economic pressure does not intensify, Putin may see little reason to rush. The Kremlin has publicly downplayed the significance of Trump's efforts, signaling both skepticism and confidence. By keeping expectations low, Moscow retains leverage, waiting to see whether the U.S. president's political will outlasts the complexities of the war. Putin also calculates the domestic politics of his counterparts. He knows Trump faces constraints from his political base, and he may bet that American commitments will remain limited. That calculation gives him space to pursue battlefield objectives, while using negotiations as a way to buy time. For Putin, diplomacy is not just about words. It is a tool to manage pressure while continuing to test the resilience of Ukraine and its allies. The European Balancing Act. For Europe, the stakes could not be higher. Countries such as Poland, Finland, Germany, and France face direct consequences from the war: refugee flows, economic pressures, and security risks. That is why 6 leaders traveled to Washington in a united front, determined to influence Trump's thinking and prevent him from drifting too close to Moscow's orbit. Their challenge lies in balancing encouragement with caution. On one hand, they want to empower Trump as a mediator, flattering his role as a global peacemaker. On the other, they must guard against any deal that compromises Ukraine's sovereignty or European security. The optics of European leaders gathering in Washington also serve a strategic purpose: to remind both Trump and Putin that Europe remains central to any solution. By arriving together, they sought to send a message of unity, countering any attempt by Moscow to exploit divisions among them. At the same time, European capitals understand that their leverage has limits. Without U.S. involvement, their capacity to guarantee Ukraine's security is weaker. This reality makes them both dependent on Trump and wary of his unpredictability, a dynamic that explains their willingness to shower him with praise even as they privately worry about his next move. Domestic pressures in the United States. While the world watches Trump on the international stage, domestic pressures loom large. His political base, animated by America First principles, has little appetite for new foreign commitments. Past moments, like U.S. strikes on Iran, already sparked unease among his supporters. For Trump, the challenge is threading the needle between being seen as a peacemaker abroad while staying true to his non-interventionist message at home. Any appearance of overcommitment in Ukraine risks backlash from voters who would prefer to see resources directed toward domestic priorities. Trump's political instincts make him sensitive to these concerns. He frames his offers of support for Ukraine in limited terms: air support rather than ground troops, shared burdens with Europe rather than unilateral commitments. This approach allows him to argue that he is promoting peace without sacrificing American interests. Still, the balancing act is fragile. If negotiations drag on without results, critics at home may question why he is investing so much political capital in a conflict thousands of miles away. For Trump, the domestic lens is never far from the international stage, and it may ultimately shape the boundaries of what he is willing to commit. The power to walk away. At the heart of all this lies a simple truth: the United States has less directly at stake in Ukraine than either Europe or Russia. This reality gives Trump both a weakness and a unique form of leverage. On one hand, it means that American commitments may lack durability, as they depend heavily on Trump's personal choices. On the other hand, the power to walk away gives Washington influence. If Trump decides the terms are unfavorable, he can step back, leaving others to pick up the pieces. That possibility, paradoxically, may help shape negotiations by reminding all parties that U.S. involvement is not guaranteed. For Trump, the opportunity is historic. He openly acknowledges that ending the Ukraine war could define his legacy. As he told one interviewer, "If I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons." But the path to peace remains narrow. Between Putin's calculations, European caution, and domestic skepticism, the road ahead is uncertain. If Trump can maintain focus, navigate competing pressures, and keep all parties at the table, he may yet achieve what has eluded others. But if attention drifts or if trust collapses, the moment could slip away just as quickly as it appeared. After 2 summits, Donald Trump finds himself at a crossroads. He has the spotlight, the ambition, and perhaps even the willingness to push for peace in Ukraine. But the obstacles are many, ranging from Putin's battlefield strategy to the doubts of his European allies and the skepticism of his political base at home. The coming weeks will reveal whether Trump can turn pageantry into progress, or whether these historic meetings will fade into the long list of missed opportunities in global diplomacy. What do you think? Can Trump truly broker peace between Ukraine and Russia, or are the challenges simply too great? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it insightful, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth breakdowns of global politics. Because sometimes, the story is not just about the headlines, it's about the obstacles, the personalities, and the delicate choices that shape history.